Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to a large number of participants joining today in this online training workshops on guidelines and best practices for MSMEs to assure resiliency and progress towards circular economy. We are starting the workshop now. I am Hari Tulsidas from UNECE. I, along with Oleg Dubinsky, Charlotte Griffiths, and Elena Trobica, welcome you all to this online training workshop. We are also fortunate to get the support of our two trainers, Michael Hashke and Hartwig Gilish, today. Thank you for joining us. And since we expect a large number of people to be here in this workshop from over 80 countries, we think that to keep the disturbance as low as possible, it will be great if you can all mute your microphones. You can use your videos or switch off your videos depending on your network connection. The chat feature of this workshop has become already very active, and I will welcome all of you to interact with each other using the chat feature. You can ask questions as you go along or put in your comments into the box. We'll try to respond to as many questions and comments as possible. This webinar is being recorded, and this recording is currently for internal purposes only. We will publish the webinar if we have an agreement from all speakers. Now it is my pleasure to give the floor to Oleg Dubinsky, the Regional Advisor Energy of UNECE, to provide the welcome remarks and overview of the MSME Search project. Over to you, Oleg.
Thank you, Hari. Good time of the day to everybody. I know we have participants from literally all over the world, and very happy to see such an interest in the topic. I would like to give a little bit of context for this workshop. We know that we are in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, and we have been in this situation since early this year, essentially February, March. The United Nations have decided and provided a rapid response to this situation. So we at UNECE work on a project.
Oleg, we lost you momentarily. Can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Somebody muted me. I didn't mute myself. And I also ask all the participants to switch off your microphones when you are not speaking. Otherwise, we get some background noise. I'm not sure where I was cut off, but I was talking about UN rapid response, and within that UN rapid response, UN has started back in June a UN Development Account Project, global initiative towards post-COVID-19 resurgence of the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. This project is being implemented by a number of UN entities. It is led by our colleagues in UNCTAD and ESCWA, our sister regional commission, Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, and UNECE actively participates in implementing it. Under this project, in the first phase of it, we have developed two sets of guidelines and best practices. And we already had online workshops on the other set, which is guidelines and best practices for MSMEs in delivering energy efficient products and in providing renewable energy equipment. We all know that small businesses, what we call MSMEs as an acronym, are among the worst hit financially by the COVID-19 pandemic. They represent over 90% of all companies in most countries in the UNECE region and are responsible for over half of GDP. Therefore, the economic recovery depends to a large extent on the ability of MSMEs to survive the crisis and improve their viability. And also, if this is successful, they may become a driving force in the green recovery post-COVID-19 crisis. So today, we have the workshop on the other set of guidelines and best practices for MSMEs to assure resiliency and progress towards a circular economy in sustainable resource management and critical raw material supply chain solutions. And we are very happy to have with us today Michael Hashke, who is the consultant for this study, and his colleagues. So without further ado, I finish my short welcoming remarks and introduction on the overall project that we are implementing and give the floor back to Hari. Thank you all.
Thank you, Oleg. I've seen a large number of participants are still joining in. We have already about more than 120 people now here. I will remind all of you to introduce yourself in the chat. And as we go along, please use the chat function to ask your questions. Now, I will provide some brief comments on this study and how it links to the United Nations Framework Classification and United Nations Resource Management System. As you know, raw materials are generated through mining or as byproducts of mining or such related activity. The process starts we are hearing some noises in the background. It will be good if all of you can go on mute, and that will provide a good atmosphere for us to continue with the workshop. Thank you all. So the mining process starts with regional conceptual studies, usually led by geological surveys. And the next phase, exploration on a initial or detailed phase, is conducted by hundreds of thousands of small businesses, usually called junior mining companies. But along with these junior mining companies or exploration companies, we have many thousands of other small businesses who provide support services of various kinds during the exploration or pre-feasibility or feasibility or even in the production phases of raw material production. But the actual raw material production on a large scale is only done by a few handful of large companies, usually multinational companies or very large national companies. So we decided to do this study on seeing how MSMEs or small businesses have a role in critical raw material production and how we can support this role of the small businesses in the background of the COVID situation. Even before the current state of affairs has unfolded, mining was under a heavy stress. It was seen as an extractive industry. Even within the background of the pandemic, we saw that suggestions are coming that most of the pandemics originates from mining areas. It is even suggested that the present coronavirus has emerged from a mine in 2012. This happens because mining industry usually encroaches into other areas of the physical environment, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, and the biosphere. It has got associated issues with high water use, generation of high quantities of waste, and also, of course, the carbon emissions. Because of all this problem, this industry has seldom received the social license to operate in whichever areas they work. COVID has brought in many new challenges in raw material supply. We have to take a few examples. We have seen that raw materials are not available for N95 masks for the healthcare workers during the current pandemic. This is a simple raw material that is a byproduct of petroleum industry. Petroleum industry is widespread all over the world, but this simple raw material found a critical issue in its supply. Similarly, the antibiotics, which requires a lot of mineral-based APIs or active pharmaceutical ingredients, found a shortage of supply in different parts of the world. We have other basic materials which are required for food, energy, and water supply, all which have got some issues with supply. Therefore, we have to see when pandemics like this strikes, how we can improve the working of the industry and how MSMEs, as Oleg has mentioned, who form the backbone of our industry, of our economy, could get more engaged in this critical raw material supply business. We find that the existing paradigms and perspectives are not enough if we want to get MSMEs involved. Previous systems are all based on a notion that resources were limited. There was blind extraction, that is the norm. Benefit only go towards stockholders of these businesses. And there were also a number of underhand methods and scams involved in this industry. Today, challenges are different. Resources are plentiful, but there is a mounting social opposition to get these projects going. Interest should be not just for the stockholders, but other stakeholders also have got an interest in the project. And this means that we have to move towards new standards and new guidelines and new best practices that can deliver to this new perspective on resource management. So we think that an comprehensive sustainable management toolkit, which is system-oriented, is required by the governments, industry, and all other stakeholders. And such a system has to be principles-based. And here I have listed a few principles that are required to manage a complex natural system. They include, number one, responsibility to planet, to a systems view, a full life cycle view, circularity, zero waste, zero harm, and continuous strengthening of competencies. Now, we can think that these principles are highly academic, highly philosophical in nature, but shortly I will show you how this become very relevant in building new business models for MSMEs. The United Nations Framework Classification for Resources, or UNFC as it's commonly called, is a classification system that is aligned to Sustainable Development Goals. UNFC has been updated recently with an integrated management of resources at its core. It offers a unified, comparable, interoperable, and harmonized approach to resource assessment and management. United Nations Resource Management System is a new system that is being built based on UNFC. UNRMS, as this is called, is a management framework to drive projects forward on a sustainable pathway. UNFC and UNRMS apply to all kinds of resources: minerals, petroleum, renewable energy, uranium, injection projects, anthropogenic resources. We are starting to work on groundwater also to be included in this system. At the very basic foundation of the system, we have social and environmental guidelines. And these guidelines make sure that all activities which are done in producing and using natural resources are aligned with what we need for the betterment of the planet and the people and their prosperity. Now, coming to MSMEs, or small businesses, you may have heard about the concept of red ocean versus blue ocean. Most companies fight like sharks in a small part of the bloodied ocean, the red corner of the ocean, whereas a vast blue ocean lies behind. It is calm, smooth, with lots of food and very little competition. This is a creative area where UNFC can be. It is a unique approach to stand out. It is free from competition, and it can capture new demand. And how we can do that is, again, going back to our basic principles, our fundamental principles. Mainstream companies or conventional businesses see all these principles as contingencies or challenges, issues, or problems. But for MSMEs, they could prove to be opportunities. So MSME businesses can look into environmental management, integrated supply chains, how technologies can be provided to reduce carbon footprint, how to improve communications between stakeholders, how we can have tools to make resources not just as a commodity but as a service, how we can develop existing fields or brown fields with a new perspective, how MSMEs can be involved in circular economy, that is how we can have recycled materials or material recycling as an integral part of resource supply. MSMEs can also look and contribute into safety, innovation, and the last but not least, MSMEs have a big role in learning and education in this sector. So what we think with this new system is to embrace a new perspective of integrated resource management involving all resources which are listed here. How we can improve financial resilience through business process innovation, how we can derive good social and environmental economic outcomes through the activities of small businesses and thereby obtain the social license to operate. So this should be the purpose of MSMEs in the global critical raw materials context. UNFC and UNRMS are not just academic pursuits, as I mentioned earlier. This has been seriously adopted by various agencies across the world, various institutions across the world. And here we have mentioned a few. European Commission has included UNFC Europe as an initiative to harmonize raw material resource management, including establishment of centers of excellence. Russian Federation and the countries in the CIS region are looking forward to establish an Eurasian Center for Sustainable Resource Management. African Union has already adopted UNFC as a resource management framework and has built the African Mineral and Energy Resource Classification and Management System, or AMRAC, based on this. We are seeing national initiatives in India, China, Colombia, Mexico, Ukraine, to mention a few leading countries which are using UNFC and UNRMS. The Coordinating Committee for Geoscience Programs in East and Southeast Asia, or CCOP, is planning an international center of excellence for the region to apply UNFC and UNRMS. With this, I will stop my brief introduction to our study and how it links to UNFC and UNRMS. In the following session by Michael and Hardwick, you will list more in-depth details into how MSMEs and critical raw material business are interlinked. Thank you very much. And now I will invite Michael, to do the next presentation. Michael Haschke is the Director of Innovation and EU Relations at DMT Group, Germany. DMT is Germany's largest mining, engineering, and consulting company. Michael holds a doctoral degree with distinction from FU Berlin, Germany, and an MSc degree in geology from University of Albany, New York, USA. He has 25 years of experience in research and development and mining consulting from positions in USA, UK, South Africa, Israel, and Germany. Michael is an accredited competent person for reporting on mineral resources and ore reserves at the European Federation of Geologists, a member of Knowledge for Innovation, or K4I network at European Parliament, the Coal Advisory Group and Eurocoal in Brussels, and an expert of UNECE's resource management, expert group on resource management in Geneva. Now I will give the floor to Michael to provide an introduction to the study which we have conducted.
Harry, thank you very much for the kind introduction. A very welcome to all of you. Now, the world has changed dramatically over the last 7 months. We all witnessed it. It has changed our lives, our economies, the way we work, and even our very natural human behavior, how we greet each other, and how we maintain our family relations. I'm sure every one of you was affected by these changes. And yet, it shouldn't come as a total surprise, because pandemics always were, an integral part of our lives. We think about earlier cases such as the Spanish flu in 1918, which lasted for about 15 months, which infected about 500 million people across the globe. Of course, well knowing that the world population at that time was 1.6 billion people compared to the 7.7 billion that we have today. Fortunately, our medical progress has improved since then, and our blood cocktail of immunity that has developed over thousands of generations is testate from previous infections, and that our ancestors have survived and passed on to us, and probably mankind's greatest legacy. And yet we have received a very stern reminder that even the most advanced medical systems do not prevent us from still being prone to viruses against which we are not immune. Now, looking forward, what are the lessons learned so far? Now that we have grown with the situation, now that it appears to slowly stabilize, vaccination is in a testing phase, it is a logical next step to not just handle the crisis for our survival, but also to build economic resilience and to lower the risk of similar crises in the near future. Among the biggest lessons learned, while globalization is helpful in lowering prices and distributing products into the most remote corners of the earth, but when crisis hits nations worldwide, it is the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, the MSMEs, that can prevent economies from total collapse and allows countries to quickly rebuild their economies and keep our life as we know it going. This webinar is about some of the lessons learned, and although I won't be able to touch on every lesson learned, here are some highlighted examples in the field of interrupted supply chains and natural resources, mineral raw materials, and how we responded to it. They are not meant to teach, but to encourage and stimulate, and perhaps provide some helpful examples on how to respond to similar crises in the future. Example 1. When COVID-19 hit the world, everybody required medical protective equipment such as facial masks, which became temporarily one of the most sought after products worldwide. Well, we quickly realized the problems associated with concentrating medical supply production in 2 countries only. In Europe, we have learned quickly that about 20% of all facial masks produced could not be used at all due to major flaws in production quality. There were problems with facial fleece quality, problems with rubber straps, problems with the airflow through the fleece and through the valves, and so on. And so at the time, the German Ministry of Health asked us to sample test the incoming mask supply. And so over the last 6 months, we sampled and tested many masks, batches of hundreds of thousands of them. And this is how we eventually regained quality control and usability over one of the now most widely used products that helps saving lives. Example 2. When COVID-19 hit Europe, it disrupted the global supply chains. The European Union came to a sobering realization it cannot continue to rely solely on imports of raw materials. The world has suddenly realized that the lockdown of the industry led to an unprecedented shortage of mineral resources in the production value chain. This bottleneck quickly aggravated as it became clear that the supply of especially sought after critical raw materials, such as rare earth elements for magnets, for wind power plants and electric vehicles, lies in the hands of a few countries. One solution was to generate an alternative value and supply chain for critical raw materials within Europe, or in collaboration with countries that share similar values as Europe. For Europe, solving this bottleneck means no less than being able to continue the carbon-free green energy transition. Now I know what you're all thinking. You are thinking, oh, well, this has been on the agenda for at least 10 years. Well, it just became reality. And this, ladies and gentlemen, was the moment of the birth of the European Raw Materials Alliance, short ERMA, E-R-M-A. That was launched last week, September 29th, by the European Commission in Brussels. Now, what is ERMA? ERMA is part of the action plan of critical raw materials as announced by the European Commission, and it is managed by EIT Raw Materials. The European Raw Materials Alliance is the answer to the strategic security question of European raw materials resilience on how to actually and reliably deliver the raw materials required to implement the European green energy transition and therefore to deliver Europe's Green Deal. Industrial ecosystems such as construction, automotive, defense, low carbon energy intensive industries, and aerospace are highly dependent on secure access to raw materials. To give you an idea, by the time of 2030, 10 years from now, these industrial ecosystems will have a combined added value of 2,000 billion euros and provide employment for more than 30 million Europeans. More specifically, IRMA addresses, and fully in line with the UN sustainability goals, the challenge of securing access to sustainable raw materials and industrial processing know-how. And by 2030, IRMA's activities will have increased the production of raw and advanced materials and addressed the circular economy by boosting the recovery and recycling of critical raw materials. And this is the IRMA action plan. Action 1 is to create a dedicated raw materials alliance. Initially, and this is very important, to build long-term resilience and strategic autonomy for the rare earth elements and the magnet value chain. This is the first raw materials action plan, before extending to other raw materials. IRMA will bring all relevant stakeholders to one table to collect the necessary expertise, for instance, from which raw materials projects to focus on and to invest in for speedy production development with financial support from Europe. The company I work for, DMT, helped to develop this and is now a founding member of this European Raw Materials Alliance. For us, this means that we and currently about 150 other partners that are supporting IRMA with the best of our raw materials and engineering knowledge, for instance, by providing know-how on international code-compliant resource and reserve estimation, which acts as an internationally accepted maturity and quality indicator for raw materials projects worldwide. So as a consequent next step will be to identify potential raw materials projects for further development so that they reach, say, within 2 to 3 years production stage and supply Europe independently with raw materials. This is how we aim to build resilience and more independency for our production value chain to implement, with less risk, the green energy transition, such as continued production of wind power plants, e-mobility, and reduction of carbon emissions, and thereby make Europe a greener place to live. The European Raw Materials Alliance will accomplish the following 4 deliverables. Establish an agile and inclusive stakeholder consultation process. I guess this partly is our job as industry. 2, support EU industrial policy to mitigate regulatory and financing bottlenecks. I guess this will be partly the task of the politicians. 3rd, set up raw materials as raw materials investment platform, RMIP, to help leverage investment in a pipeline of selected key projects. Now that's the job for banks and investors and also industry. 4th, foster a deeper strategic awareness, including public acceptance of and forward-looking perspective on the role of raw and advanced materials in a transition of the green and digital economy. That's mainly a job for the local politicians and NGOs. So basically, in summary, IRMA is about the bigger projects. It's about, for instance, opening a new processing plant or opening a new mine with the help of combined investments. So now these were just 2 selected examples and how we have responded to the crisis. But there's so much more that we can do. And this workshop shows that one key to handle this crisis lies in the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in the MSMEs that are the actual main drivers of the world's economy rather than the international companies and global industry players. In the following session, my colleague will outline other important issues in the field of raw materials and explain why the establishment of a MSME Raw Material Alliance for Circular Economy is recommended in this study. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat section. Thank you, and now back to you, Harry.
Thank you, Michael, for providing that very concise and brief outline of the study in few words, and raising some of the issues in raw materials supply, which we faced during the pandemic, or we are continuing to face during this pandemic. We also mentioned about the European Raw Material Alliance, which is coming forward to solve some of these issues. I hope the European Raw Material Alliance will be a good example for other regions also to understand their situation and ensure that raw materials are made available without any disruptions. We are getting a lot of comments here in the chat box. But very briefly, before moving to Hardwick, one of the issues which was raised was the falling social acceptance of mining, mainly due to environmental issues surrounding mining. Can you make a quick comment on how MSMEs can help assure better environmental performance in the mining sector? Thank you, Michael.
Yes, MSMEs in the mining sector, they are actually the main drivers of innovation as we know it. Our learning curve from the mining industry was that global raw materials players are relatively conservative when it comes to innovation in the mining industry. They are directly dependent on smaller companies, on micro scale. Sometimes these companies consist of 1 or 2 people, but they are the brain behind the innovations in the mining industry. Usually they have worked in the mining industry themselves for some even many years, and they know exactly what the mining industry wants. And by being independent, they now have the liberty and usually also the finances by risk funding to develop innovative solutions for the mining industry.
Thank you, Michael. One more question, very briefly. Can you explain what is the main difference between UNFC and SERA? Because both were mentioned previously. Thank you.
The main difference between SERA is that they are very much fully aligned. They are working on all raw materials, and the ambition of SERA is to track the actual raw materials recovery chain, the actual extraction chain. And UNFC is able to provide a management system for tracking this complete value chain.
Thank you, Michael. I think more questions are coming up, but we will take it later in the workshop. I will request all the participants also to have a look at the report that is available in our website, meeting website. A link is there. And this report gives more details on UNFC, SERA, and other issues which we are discussing now. We will not have time to go into great detail into many aspects, but the report has got a comprehensive information on all the issues which we will be discussing today. So with this, I will now invite Hartwig Gleisch to make the presentation on the study. Hartwig is an exploration geologist, studied at the Ruhr University, Bochum, Germany. Hartwig has more than 20 years of experience as a geologist and exploration manager in natural resource exploration projects, mainly searching for hard coal and lignite. Hartwig is a qualified, competent person for natural resource estimation reports and registered as a European geologist with the European Federation of Geologists. Since 2006, Hartwig mainly works in India and works closely with Coal India Limited. Now, over to you, Hartwig, for your presentation. And if you can share your presentation from your screen, it will be great. Thank you. Hartwig, if you can unmute.
Yeah, I must. Sorry, everybody, I must switch off my microphone. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I will give you a short presentation about guidelines, best practice for MSMEs in the crisis in sustainable resource management, critical raw material supply chain solutions, and give also an overview about the problematic of critical raw materials. At first, I want to show you the definition of micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are in the European Union is describing enterprises below 250 employees. The amount of enterprises in this SMEs is more than 99% of the enterprises in the European community. You can see in the first line that in the EU, nearly 99.8% of the enterprises are small, medium enterprises as a definition. There are 137 million people working in this small enterprises, and so it becomes a backbone of the world and the European community, because in the most other countries, US, South America, the same percents are reached. America, US is also 99% of the enterprises are SMEs. So it is one of the important part of the world's industry. What is a critical raw material? Critical raw materials are raw materials that are urgent needed, but are not available everywhere. So the list of critical raw materials in Europe is published by the European Commission and was updated in this summer 2020 after the last update in 2017. It describes materials the industry in Europe needs urgently, and this has a lot of very seldom minerals and rare earth elements. It is antimony, beryllium, bismuth, borax, cobalt, coking coal, fluorspat, gallium, germanium, hafnium, every part of the every type of rare earth elements, indium, magnesium, natural graphite, natural rubber, niobium, platinum group metals, phosphate rocks, phosphor, scandium, silicon metals, tantal, tungsten, vanadium, and as new parts, bauxite, lithium, titanium, and strontium. So these are the raw materials which are not everywhere available in Europe. Why we need this critical raw materials? Critical raw materials are the basis for almost all future and key industries. This includes defense industry, batteries, automotive sector, chemicals and fertilizers, renewable energies, electrical and electronical equipment. not only our economic future depends on the supply, over the next 15 years, the consumption of critical raw materials in the EU will multiply. It will increase dramatically. 2015, we had a lower standard of lithium. But in the next 15 years, due to the battery industry of electric cars, will rise up to 2,565%. So the amount of lithium we need in the next 15 years is around 25 times higher than today. The same is with cobalt, the same is with graphite. And for the electric traction motors, we need rare earth elements like neodymium, praseodymium, and dysprosium. And this will be 10 times more than we have today. So every part of our economy is hardly affected by the non-occurrence of these minerals in the near surrounding. We will discuss later about the supply. Not only our economic future depends on the supply of critical raw materials, but also our defense capability depends on the access of critical raw materials. So it's only a little example what I give you with this table. We need lanthanum for night vision goggles, neodymium for laser rangefinders, guidance system for the communication, europium for fluorescence and phosphor in lamps and monitors, erbium for amplifiers in fiber optic data transmission, samarium for permanent magnets that hold stable at high temperature. You need it for rockets. Samarium is also needed for precision guide weapons. Also, it is a white noise to produce the stealth technology for invisible aircrafts. So directly, our security is basing on the on these rare earth elements, which are part of the critical raw materials. In future, the elevation of raw materials will not only depend on the geological existence and economic viability, but also on factors such as acceptance by the population and effects on the environment and society. Hari gives a good overview about the United Nations Framework classification of resources. I will only give a short overview. This includes from 1997 solid fuels and minerals, then oil, gas, and uranium 2009, 2016. They include renewable energies, geothermal and injection projects, 2017 bioengineering energy, 2018 anthropogenic resources, and 2020 the integrated renewable resource classification for geothermal and bioenergy into the system. So nearly every natural resource we have on the planet could be described with this framework classification, and it is a three-dimensional system. It plots against technical feasibility, degree of confidence, and environmental and socio-economic viability. The UNECE has already evaluated many of critical raw material studies based on the UNFC standard. There are available studies about rare earth elements, thorium and niobium, phosphate rocks, bioenergetic resource, oil and gas, uranium. This system, the system is described in many publications from the organization by case studies, so you can learn and study how to use it. One of the main problems with the supply of critical raw materials from primary mineral resource is that very many of the critical raw materials are only being produced and mined in some countries. This is partly due to the high environmental regulations in some countries, which make mining uneconomical, and it due to the convenience to simply buying critical raw materials on the world market. For Europe and Germany, there is a perfect example. It's a cooking coal, which is becoming in Europe a critical raw material. Germany and Poland and parts of Czech Republic sitting on cooking coal, but due to the regulations, Germany is giving up mining, Poland is on the way to do it, and also in Czech Republic, the acceptance of the people is not there to mine this in Central Europe. The problem we have is that we are living in one world, and there is a question if it is feasible to take the coking coal from Central America or Australia. But this is a discussion which is not part of our discussion today, and we may have a look on the map how many raw materials are concentrated in these countries, except the US and Russia, the main producer of critical raw materials is China. And China is dominating the world market in nearly all critical raw materials, including rare earth elements. So the problem of a raw material supply is the transport from China. This is clear. But in the moment, we have a crisis, the pandemic. But it leads only to time problems. I will discuss this later, but we must think about the supply if we get a real problem, a war, economic war, or something like this, which could cut off the rest of the world from the supply of critical raw materials and rare earth elements. The circular economy is not always a panacea to guarantee the supply. Biosphere and technosphere, as shown in the picture, can hardly be compared, even if a closed circular economy is sometimes dreamed up by some economists. I have an example on the right side. This is a study about future farming in closed loop systems. And for me, it is not producing agricultural products for 7 million people. This farm on the picture is looking like a hobbit farm in Shire. This is a dream that we can survive with nearly 8 billion people by having such a agricultural production. What is the problem with the circular economy and minerals? Most of the critical raw materials are not suitable for circular economy as they are not recoverable through recycling. Here are some examples from recycling rates we have in published by European Union. We have only 44% of vanadium are possible to recycle, tungsten 42, cobalt 35, antimony 28, phosphate rocks 70%, and so on. And then we have the criticals, rare earth elements, light 7%, heavy 6%, natural graphite we need for batteries 3%, germanium 2%, and then it goes down with hafnium, fluorspar, barite, natural rubber, tantal, and so on 1%, and beryllium, borates, gallium, indium, niobium, phosphor, scandium, and SE minerals are not possible to recycle. If we look for the periodic table of elements, it is the most important value describing the recycling capacity of each critical raw material is the end of life recycling input rate. And this picture shows you the possibility to recycle the elements from waste or from dumps. There are only copper, silver, and lead which have more than 50% recycling value. All others are lower, and they're really seldom, like the rare earth elements, are ranging between 1 and 10% recycling rates. A lot of elements are not possible to recycle, and one of the importance with zero is lithium. The lithium is not possible to recycle from waste or from dumps. We do not have enough raw material to supply the EU with critical raw materials from secondary mineral resources, from landfills, dumps, or something like this.
Just a moment, Hartwig. I will request all participants to go on mute, please. Getting some noise on the lines. Can I request all of you to be on, press your mute button? Yes, thank you. Hartwig, please continue.
Yes. The supply of critical raw materials from secondary mineral resources like landfills, dumps, and so on is not enough material to supply Europe's with critical raw materials for a long time. There are plotted in the picture in the table. We have the blue columns is the annual addition to landfills, and the red cross marks the highest amount of a material in landfills in Europe. So I will not discuss every mineral or any element, but the best example is cobalt. Cobalt is annual addition, the annual addition of cobalt is around 10,000 tons per year. The stock in the landfills is all in Europe 100,000 tons. The supply of the European Union in 2017 was a consumption of 104,000 tons of cobalt. So in 2017, we could supply Europe with cobalt 1 year from the secondary mineral resource from landfills. This is not referring the fact that we have to use 20 times more cobalt in the next 15 years. So we cannot supply Europe from only secondary mineral resources. So we must find new primary deposits. This is the intention of the different projects of the European Union, like raw material, RIT, EURAR, and so on, to find new primary mineral deposits in the EU. To ensure the supply with critical raw materials, we need to find new resources for primary mineral resources of CRMs in Europe or elsewhere. Also, there are some different projects in the EU to find new raw material supplies of secondary mineral deposits. One of the best results in the last years is the bauxite red muds from Greece, which contain a higher grade of rare earth elements. I will show you later a picture of the amount, what it is inside. The melting and producing of aluminium is also hiring the grade of rare earth elements in the red muds, because the Bayer process is nearly doubling the rare earth elements in the remaining red muds, because they put out the aluminium oxide, aluminium oxide from all the dumps. There is a Greek colleague, Davis, from Mytilineos Greek aluminium, described in the publication developing new processes for selective extraction of rare earth elements from bauxite residues based on functional ionic liquids, the processing of rare earth elements from these bauxite residues. According to information from the authors, in the moment they are in the testing phase, but they are building also a small plant in the Mytilineos aluminium production plant in Agios Nikolaos in Greek. So if we look to the Greek cast bauxites, we have as example the first directly, the pure bauxite, and includes 57 microgram per kilogram. The red mud of the same deposit contains 130 milligram per kilogram. So it is more than double higher, and this is nearly for all Greek cast bauxites. And you had a lot of different cerium, rare earth elements, all you need for our industry, which are sleeping on the dumps of the aluminium industry in Greek. The problem is not every bauxite in the world contains such a high amount of rare earth elements, but the European do it. There is an example, lateritic bauxite from Ghana. There are the contents of rare earth elements are much lower than in Greek, but the Greek bauxites are now in testing for this hiring the amount of rare earth elements for the European industry. This is a test, the pilot plant using these unique liquids to extract the rare elements from the red mud. And on the left picture, on the right picture, you see the black, dark grayish horizon inside the liquids. So these are the rare earth elements which are possible to extract from the bauxites, and this is they call it today's waste is turned into tomorrow's treasure. My colleague Michael Haschke also described the foundation of ERMA, so I will only have a short overview about this. The European Raw Material Alliance was founded 1 week before, and they are specially founded to solve the problem we discussed in the last 20 minutes, the supply with raw materials, not only from the EU, also in worldwide action. Let's come to the actual problem we have in the world. The supply crisis with critical raw materials is intensified by the current corona problem. This is the situation on the 14th September, and you see that mainly the South Asian and East Asian countries are out of the big problem. Also Africa, Central Africa does not have a major problem, but the rest of the world is hardly stressed by the pandemic, and this affects not only the small and middle the small and middle enterprises. It affects everybody. How the pandemic affects the world of work. We have on the right side, on the left side, we have the status in People's Republic of China, published by the Research Center of the Beijing University. And we have in the first column, in percent, the amount of work which is not resumed in the first weeks of the pandemic. It is more than nearly 10% which are not coming back to work. This is data from the beginning of the problem. They have in the middle the enterprises who don't know how the future is, if they could work again or not. And the main problem for all enterprises, and very hard for small and middle enterprises, is the delay of more than a month in delivering the goods. Same situation is seen on the right side. This is the situation in the United States of America. So nearly 50% of the business of the companies don't know how is the business in the next year. This is a big problem for all, for investments, for people's work, because you cannot pay the staff of a company for 1 year if you don't have a future outlook. The only sector which is very optimistic is the healthcare and social assistance sector. All others are highly affected by the pandemic. I give you an example from a small country, how the pandemic affect the local economy. This is an example from the Republic of Mongolia and was published by the Mongolian Mining Journal in this summer, in this spring. Increase or decrease from of production. You see copper concentration, minus 14.5%. Coal production, minus 62.4%. Iron ore, minus 3%. Gold, minus 6.6%. Nearly all imports, crude oil, 80%, are going down. Some are also rising, but all in all, it is a loss of a high amount of money and possibilities. What affects the supply of critical raw materials in the COVID-19 pandemic? The path from mining to the final product is directly dependent on the availability of logistics and personnel. With the supply chains, all problems of the pandemic can occur. The availability of transporting staffs, lorry drivers, porters, they're not coming to the work. The miners are not coming to the work because there is a lockdown or something like this. The trucks, which are not allowed to pass province or national borders, which cannot deliver the goods to the harbors or to other transportation systems like trains, something on. We have the problem that Interpost Custom Office in port will need staff to check the goods which are going out of the country. The ships lying partly more than 3 weeks in quarantine in the ports. The custom clearance in the port of destination is also a problem because they have not enough people to do the work. All these problems cannot be calculated in advance by every kind of enterprise, but it affects the small enterprises more than the bigger ones because the specialization of the staff is not so widespread like in bigger companies. Guidelines and best practice for navigating challenges for micro, small, and middle enterprise in the raw material supply business environment. National and international institutions are a big help for micro, small, and middle enterprises, business facilitation, and business registration. In the short term, during the pandemic, unbureaucratic aid measures, such as simplifying import regulations, can considerably simplify the situation of the companies. Simplification of laws and regulation can significantly simplify the situation in long term. Use the time to train your employees. This is a very important thing because people are sitting in the home office or in the office, mainly in home office, and you can start train your people in different things. National and international institutions and companies provide all kinds of training on the internet, like entrepreneurship, skill facilitation, market business access, access to finance, and so on. I will give some examples what companies could do in the pandemic to hire the effect of their business. Train your employees, digitalize your company and train your employees. Train your role as an entrepreneur. Learn all about laws and regulations. Explore your supply chains of the supply chains of your company. Learn more about innovative technology. Learn how to get funding from outside. Explore the fastest routes to the market access. And this is normally better to do it before you need it, but in the pandemic, it could help to make your business better, faster, and safer. There is an example from Europe, but such institutions you have all over the world. Access to technology in Europe is organized by the key enabled technologies. This is an organization which organized 250 technology centers in Europe, which offer training courses for all kinds of employees in Europe. So every country in Europe has such a CAT technology center. All kinds of training are offered. You find the CAT programs in internet. Access to finance. This is an absolutely important thing because the investment capital of small and middle enterprises are not very high, and also the bank guarantees and something like this. The payment for the workers and so on. This is all a problem over a longer time of lockdown and not working, and handling the problem with a delay of raw materials coming from outside. This is Corona Aid, Relief and Economic Security Act from the American government, which gives nearly $2.3 trillion into the society. This includes large business, small business, households, state and municipalities, and so on, health providers. So the state invested into the own organization into the own state. In Europe, the same program, I think, is around 700 billion of euros by the European Communion in the next time. How could governmental institutions help during the pandemic? It is very important that the government and the politicians improve the institutional framework and operational environment. This includes all time of cut down regulations and all these things which have an influence of the SMA specific regulations and the business of this small company. As discussed before, the easy access to finance for these people. They must have the possibility to hold their trained and educated staff. There is a fairy tale that you can find everybody at the car station. If you want to have an engineer or a specialist or something like this, And if the small companies don't have the possibility to hold the educated staff, the innovation of these companies is lost forever. Promote skill development and entrepreneurial culture. This is a typical a typical job for the politicians. This is always in training courses and so on done by the local offices of the chambers of commerce. In Europe, it is widespread system with this chambers of commerce, and they are training the people who are leading such small and middle enterprises. Also, support the internationalization of small and middle enterprises. Improve export promotion activities. Provide services to SMEs to adapt deep and comprehensive free trade areas requirements. Provide targeted finance supports of exporting SMEs and facilitate SME innovation and research and development activities. The legal framework is the work of the politicians to help the companies in the pandemic. Summary: I present the 4 important points of the seminar. It has been very confidential to order the majority of CRMs from China. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that countries that have a need for CRMs will have to take care of the development of a new raw material reserves themselves in the future. In order to protect their own companies, middle, small, and micro enterprises should network more closely to participate in the international exchange of knowledge. Digitalization of the company is essential in this respect. SMEs should provide early training to their staff to develop internal procedures to assess compliance risk and ensure compliance with legal requirements. Equally important is the company's knowledge of supply chain, internationally custom and national import regulations. Government and international institutions can and should support micro, small, and middle enterprises in networking and information provision. An important task of governmental agency is to provide the framework for rapid financial assistance in the event of a crisis. As discussed before, we give a recommendation to build up a group, an organization which brings together politicians, financial institutions, and these micro, small, and middle enterprises. We can call it MSME, Raw Material Alliance for Circular Economy. And this could be organized by the United Nations Economic Commission of Europe. The current status of micro, small, and middle enterprise in the critical raw material supply. MSME needs critical raw materials from primary deposit because recycling of many critical raw materials only partially or not possible. The supply of critical raw materials from primary deposits is in the hand of a few countries. The further development of any future technology is not feasible without access to critical raw materials. Without access to critical raw materials, there will be no progress in the field of communication, in further development of electric vehicles, renewable energy, and national defense. The pandemic will temporarily stop or reduce primary production in the supplier countries through country-specific lockdowns. Therefore, production in importing countries will be cut back for the same reason. There will therefore be temporary reduction of both supply and demand. The pandemic has shown the world how vulnerable supply chains are in a globalized world. The pandemic will change this supply chain and their future organization. I will give some comments as final conclusions. The research of critical raw materials in secondary deposits will not provide us with critical raw materials for a long time. It is only an interim solution. Recycling management and circular economy only works to a limited extent and only for a short time. It is not the perpetuum mobile. What Europe and the world needs to be independent from critical raw material countries are own primary deposits. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Hartwig, for a very comprehensive overview of the study which we have done. And perhaps this has generated a lot of comments in the chat section. I will request all of you to ask more questions if you find it relevant here. In the meantime, let me ask some other questions that has been raised in this forum. What do you think are the short-term measures that are required for MSMEs in critical raw materials in this pandemic period? And what do you think should be the long-term measures? You mentioned a little bit on how MSMEs should be prepared in this pandemic period for more disruptions ahead. But can you just re-summarize the key points on the short-term and long-term requirements which MSMEs should be aware of? Maybe Hartwig, you can answer. Yeah.
Sorry, I must come back to the meeting because I was kicked out by the system. I don't understand your question now.
Yeah, but basically the question is, what are the short-term and long-term measures which MSMEs should be aware of in this pandemic situation? What they should be aware of to be prepared for more disruption ahead? Yes,
I think during the pandemic, in the first step, short step is the governmental and political institution must give a possibility to survive for them. So the main problem is in the first half a year maybe is the financial problem, and they must hold their stuff because if the people are out of job, become unemployed, the the small and middle institutions and enterprises don't have a perspective for the long term or for the future, because these little and small and middle enterprises are living from the people who are working inside the company. To hold this stuff inside the company is one of the important things for these small and middle enterprises in the pandemic, because the heart of such a company are the engineers or the practical workers who know what to do. And if this know-how is lost for the company, they don't have a longer perspective. They will throw out of the market.
Thank you, Hartwig. Another question that is asked is, like you mentioned, that lithium is very difficult to be recycled. And you also mentioned in general, most of the materials have got very limited recyclability. Can you elaborate why lithium cannot be recycled, and what are the issues with other metals like cobalt, nickel, etc.? Thank you.
There is a big problem because these materials are not free. They are in chemical connections to other elements. And it is very, very difficult to break off these other elements. So these are data from the Deloitte Sustainability et al. From 2017, and I take this as an example, because you cannot extract the lithium back from the waste. You get lithium not as a metal free, you have it in a chemical composition, and this is not possible to break. Until now, there is no chemical recycling step to isolate the lithium. This is always the problem with also all the other metals in the periodic table of element picture I show you.
Thank you, Hartwig. There was a lot of interest on the extraction of rare earth elements from red mud. And we had questions asked about similar situation with phosphate waste and also coal tailings or coal ash. Can you mention something on all these issues? How difficult or how easy is the extraction of rare earth materials from these materials?
The extraction of rare earth elements is always a complicated chemical process. It takes years to find these special ionic liquids, which a Greek used now to extract the rare earth from bauxite. From phosphate, I don't know enough. But from coal, it is also possible to recycle some of these rare earth elements if they include it. I know there are some coal mines in the east of Russia which has a higher content of selenium, which is also win from the coal.
Thank you, Hartwig. There is a question on historical data which geological surveys have. What do you think about the quality of data which has been preserved in the records of various geological surveys around the world? Whether that could be used for projects today, and it is also related to a question on some of the abandoned projects. Like there are a lot of projects which were explored partially, and then they were not allowed to proceed for the last 20 or 30 years. So how can we revive these projects? How can we use the data and also revive these projects?
Yeah, normally the geological surveys of the countries of the world know about their country and have a lot of studies which are partly published and partly are unpublished. Of course, we can use it for the definition of a strategy to win these economical minerals from such abandoned projects. You know that is worldwide they are start to reactivating dumps from mine waste to win the material. There's a very special example from India I have. The Indian coal dumps, the waste dumps of the coal mines contain nearly 12 to 20% of coal. And you can win this coal very easily by the processing of the dumps. So there is always a way to find to get these materials also from waste dumps, and I'm sure in the case of a crisis, of a real crisis, like there is no availability for critical raw materials, the countries will start mining also this forbidden or not allowed projects. But this is a political decision.
Thank you, Hartwig. A related question has just come up, is that how can the government administration really strengthen the working of the mining sector in developing countries so that they can have quicker access to finance to bring some of these projects online? So what do you think are the measures which governments should be doing to strengthen this sector, especially from the lessons learned from so far from the pandemic?
So I'm not a politician, and this is a very difficult question because the situation in these countries is very different from country to country. There are the normal problem is in such countries that the politic is not organized. There is nobody who speaks to the small and middle enterprises. There is a step between the countryside and the capital of a lot of countries, that all the institutions, banks, and all the institutions who can give help are sitting in the capital, but the mines are outside in the country. So there must be something like a localization, that the institutions from the politics and the institutions of finance are available directly at the place where they are needed, also in the countryside.
Okay, thank you. I think our report also gives some more details of the steps which governments can do. But maybe there is a question for Michael, if you can come online. So can you explain on how European Raw Material Alliance will be supporting MSMEs in production of raw materials? Very briefly, if you can.
Yeah, this is something that ultimately EIT Raw Materials and European Raw Materials Alliance will decide because they are the one managing it, and they have a website where you can look up the current activities at erma.eu. So I recommend looking up the details there. But in terms of any MSMEs in Europe, the main point is always for their project, if it's in the raw material sector, to reach high maturity, such as to reach the feasibility stage as soon as possible. For European players, there are abundant financing opportunities. We have the European Development Bank, we have the European Investment Bank, we have on an US basis, we have the World Bank that is funding larger places. But it works like any bank. You know, they want to see a certain type of security in exchange, and they want to see that there's a proper return of the investment. So for Europe, there are plenty of funding opportunities. But MSMEs, or let's call them junior miners for Europe, they're facing quite a few challenges in Europe because the public opinion for mining is currently not in favor for mining projects. People do understand that in order to have the new iPhone, you need to have aluminum, you need to have rare earth elements, and many other materials. But nobody is prepared to allow them in their backyard. So currently, there's some convincing to be made, and so this is something that requires a lot of work. I'm sorry. Maybe I can also add to the other questions. There was a question on extracting rare earth elements from coal, and I hope that I was able to answer in the chat. So you have to look in more detail what the actual rare earth elements, because there's 17 rare earth elements, and you have to look in detail what the actual rare earth elements are included in the coal waste material. Because, for instance, if you want to produce magnets, you know, for the wind power plants, for e-mobility, you need a lot of neodymium. That is one of the rare earth elements, plus some praseodymium and plus some dysprosium. So these are some of the middle rare earth elements. But from what I know, then, but correct me if I'm wrong, if you have a lot of products that contain secondary rare earth elements, such as phosphate, yes, also coal waste, but you have to look in more detail. Are these the right rare earth elements that you actually need? And also please be aware that extraction of the rare earth elements, which is usually done by leaching, that's not the main cost driver. The main cost driver is further processing, because we have to separate the rare earth elements from one another. Because you're usually leaching an entire group of rare earth elements together with many other elements, and you have to separate them from one another. And this is the first very cost-consuming process. And then you have to refine them. You usually have to produce them as oxides. So there are not that many refining plants in Europe. And if you want to refine on a large scale so that it becomes economically attractive, you need processing plants which require very large investments. And we don't have these processing plants yet.
Yeah, if I may add a little bit onto this discussion, question is also asked whether on the question of availability of funding for these projects, especially in developing countries. So one way is, in my opinion, is to make sure that all the data is collected and the project developed in an acceptable manner that will be attractive for the funding agencies, which you have mentioned, like the European banks and the World Bank, etc. So if they have to make an investment in any of the projects, there should be a certain quality of the project, which could be assured by the standards like UNFC, UNRMS, and SERA. So what is your opinion on that, and the role of competent persons in this issue?
Yeah, Harry, this is something incredibly important because I witnessed myself what, for instance, happened in, let me just single out one particularly type example, Mongolia. Mongolia is very rich in mineral resources, and they had, if we stay with the rare earth elements for a second, they have made a first approach and privatized the rare earth element projects. But very few of the projects were able to attract private investment. And so the Mongolian government, according to my knowledge, is now considering to compile and merge the private licenses again into one big state license, and then request for external funding, such as through the World Bank or other funding institutions. So if that could be handled through UNFC and presented in a standardized way, see, you have to approach the bank the way they're used to. So if they are being presented a proposal that is formatted and contains the right detail and the right data and enough data, so that they can make a decision on the project, I think this would help significantly. But if you don't approach them with the right data and the right proposal, then there's nothing they can do because there's nothing to decide. So it's incredibly important to bring everything into the required standardized form, so that that makes projects comparable for the bank, and then they're much more inclined to consider financing. But again, there are lots of financing institutions worldwide, and especially in Europe. Yes.
So, thank you, Michael. I think to add will be that it is also important to see how other sources of investment and funding or investments could be also utilized. And this will require, again, new approaches to the whole business. We are all seeing this mining business as a commodity business, like we should generate a certain amount of materials and sell it and make money out of that. But if it could be also seen as an service sector, like we can have services offered to the supply chain, where we are supplying materials when required or in quantities that are changing over time. There are peaks in demand, and there are times in which demand will not be much. But it is critical that companies or the supply chain players get the materials without interruption all the time. And this creates alternative business models, much like what Airbnb has done with the hotel industry, or Uber has done with the taxi industry, utilizing capacities which are idling over time and using it when required. You have talked about digitalization as a very important aspect for MSMEs in future. I think these are some of the things which digitalization can enable and bring in smart funding for such type of business innovation. Any comments either from Michael or Hartwig regarding this?
Yes, I think this is one of the key factors. Digitalization is essential for all small and middle enterprises because it opened the world of information for them. Today, it is possible, if you sit somewhere in the center of the desert, you can get a connection to the world market and to the market of finance. So there is a absolutely must for an office inside such a small or middle enterprise to sample all the informations the internet is giving you. Nearly all international organizations who supplies help and also knowledge has websites where you can check what you need and what can help your enterprise. So the digitalization of the companies is an absolutely must for the future and the long-term development of such little and middle enterprises.
Yeah, Harry, if I may add, the digitalization that Hartwig just mentioned, we're also getting the first data from the large companies. And one of the consulting companies, I think McKinsey has compiled the data and made a very interesting comparison in their 2019 report. And from what the initial data on digitalization shows is that the benefit, the economic benefit, such as productivity, by that the digitalization helps to increase, is in the order of, well, there are some different figures, but there seems to be a rough idea between 5 and 15%. So that's the actual economic benefit of digitalization. So it's not, for me, this was interesting. It's not 50%, it's not 70%. And there may be some sectors where it actually is in this order. But if we compare all the numbers and we see the initial benefits, but this may just be a temporary status, but this status is currently sitting at 5 to 15% enhanced productivity by digitalization.
Thank you, Michael. I think this is very pertinent information. When I think about the mining industry or raw material industry, we have been working for centuries with same tools and technologies and methodologies and approaches. Some of these methodologies, of course, are relevant, but in a future where things are going to be totally different, we have to have a rethink of some of the tools which we are using. And digitalization is, of course, one of the key aspects of that. In this regard, many questions were asked about our alliance, MSME Alliance for Raw Materials in Circular Economy. And I think the comment is that this is a concept which we are trying to promote. We have not started this alliance yet. It is not a reality, but it is only an idea. As we have seen in the questions and comments which have come up in this session, we have seen that the challenges, the issues and problems which are to be faced by MSMEs in raw material supply is quite diverse and huge. And in many of these areas, we have not started coherent dialogue on how we can find new solutions, bring in new innovations into our business models. So this is where this alliance will be an important aspect. And I hope we will continue this discussion forward and see how it is interesting for countries and companies and investors coming together in such an alliance. And if there is sufficient interest, we will see how we can take this forward. I will also recommend all the participants to have a look at the report which I mentioned. It is in the website of the meeting, and the report also contains more ideas. Some of these ideas are just preliminary ideas because this is the first time we are thinking on small businesses in critical raw material supply. And we have to go a long way in formalizing a structured manner in which Small businesses can access finance, they can access technology, how they can access markets, etc. And how policies and strategies can be structured to help small businesses to be successful in this area, so that we will never face supply problems so in making masks or for medicines in future. It is a real shame that many of our health workers who were in front line, who are still in front line in fighting this pandemic, were not getting masks. They have to reuse masks for days together. Some people have no mask at all, were using plastic bags to cover their faces. So this is a real shame that raw material supply could not keep up to face this situation. We should learn from our past, and we should not allow same mistakes to happen in future. This is why this alliance is very much important. When we face unforeseen circumstances, maybe a pandemic or maybe a natural disaster like floods or droughts or forest fires, we are not prepared to face this situation. So we are entering nearly the end of our time. I will ask Michael if you have any final comments, and then Hartwig if you have any final comments. Michael, please.
Thanks, Hari. I think the most amazing thing of what I see is that we are adjusting, that we have made the necessary steps. Some countries better than others, but I think we are on the right track, and we will prevail once yet again. And the economic recovery is on its way, although it may take a little longer than expected. But I think we are on the right track. I think creation of the European Raw Materials Alliance is definitely a good move in the right direction. And of course, our company is fully prepared to support this with every know-how that we have. I hope that we can see the results because the goals of this alliance are very ambitious. They do want to see first results within the next 2-3 years, and we're very much looking forward to the initial results. And but overall, I think we have to make the right investments, and we have to probably merge investments, maybe create state investments plus private investments, because the investments required for raw materials are very, very large. We have some catching up to do if we want to meet ends with other countries, but I think we're on the right track.
Do you have any final comments to make?
Yes, I think the most was done by Michael, but there are some issues I have. So we see in the pandemic one thing very clear: the world is going nearer together, and it becomes smaller in the last 10 years. So we have to think global. It is not possible to think in your own country borders. You have to think global about the problems of the other countries, the problem in your own country, because in a short time, your problem will be also another country's problem. We see it very clearly in the pandemic. What we also see in the pandemic is that we had to start thinking about the supply of raw materials from our own sources. It is not possible to buy anything on the world market. We see what happens if there is a pandemic like this. You cannot compare it with a real pandemic like the Spanish flu. In the Spanish flu, the world was more hardly beaten like in this pandemic. But it is maybe a chance for the future to change the raw material politics, that you cannot look only for one or two countries which are producing these raw materials and the rest of the world is buying it. We must think about that we have to produce our own primary mineral resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Hartwig. Thank you, Michael. You have provided very valuable inputs on the role of MSMEs in critical raw material supply. I thank you both for your presentation. We had a very useful, very productive comment session also going on in parallel. We tried to answer most of the issues which were raised, but this is only a start of a conversation. We don't have answers to all the questions you have raised. This is something we have to keep moving on forward with collaboration with one another. And this is where the alliance, MSME alliance, which we have proposed, will be very important. But if I can briefly summarize the key takeaways from today's session is that critical raw materials supplies were severely threatened by the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is an example how unforeseen events can quickly come in and disrupt our best laid plans. And often we are not really prepared to face such situation. MSMEs are the bulk of our economy, has been severely impacted by this situation, but the ensuing recovery is an important opportunity where MSMEs will have a bigger role to play. MSMEs should come out of the situation stronger with new ideas, and especially in raw material supply, with new creative ideas that can attract more investments into projects. Having guidelines and best practices which could be used by different practitioners in different countries will be helpful in such situations. And this is where we think UNFC, UNRMS, and other standards like SERA will play a big role. That can help the major players of small businesses to quickly come to solutions without spending a lot of time in trial and errors, so that at least some steps could be shortened. Of course, there is a long way to go in certain other steps, which we cannot have shortcuts. But these standards, UNFC, UNRMS, will provide help in progressing more quickly with some of those steps. So with that, we will conclude the event now. I will once again thank all the speakers, Oleg, Michael, and Hartwig for your valuable inputs. And we have other events also planned. We have the presentation as well as the report available in the meeting website. The UNECE website will give more information on UNFC and UNRMS. You can come here and download materials in our website. I will also like to inform you the future events which we are organizing next week. That is 15th October 2020, same time, 12 o'clock CET. We will have a seminar on women in mining cases and best practices from United Kingdom, Australia, and South Africa. And I will also inform that this is done under the aegis of the Women in Resource Management Initiative under the expert group on resource management. They will be organizing 2 more seminars or webinars this year. What is new in mining, 26 November, and women leadership in oil and gas, and updated outlook on 18 December. More information will follow regarding these events. I welcome all of you. I invite all of you to participate in these events in future. With that, let me conclude the session today. I once again thank all of the participants for your active participation in this chat and being with us throughout this webinar.
Harry, I just wanted to add also to thank you and Michael and Hartwig for this great event, for this workshop that we had, and add that we continue work on the UN Development Account project. We are now in phase 2 until the end of January, February next year. And in this phase, we are planning to do customization of guidelines and best practices for 2 pilot countries, for Ukraine and Tajikistan. And next year in phase 3, we may look into doing such customization for more countries. That will depend on the funding available. But again, thank you to our speakers, thank you to the participants, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oleg, for that final words. So now we are closing this session. Thank you all, and be safe, and hopefully we will all meet physically sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
For now.
Thank you. Bye.